begin with Rav Hirsch's view of the Parsha Vayera. This Parsha is packed. It has the story of Saddam and Gomorrah. It has the story of Melchizedek. It has the story of retrieving Lot. It has the story of... actually, we'll do very quickly, because it's such a full Parsha, and then we're going to wonder, what is it that Rav Hirsch decided to talk about? So let's just take a look for a second at a quick run-through of this Parsha. And I'm just going to read you the captions from the Parsha. Right? So, it begins with Hashem comes to visit Avraham when he's recovering from his bris. Right? He promises him a son. Right? He promised a son. It's actually revealed to Sarah originally. Right? Then later, after that, he learns about the three angels, why they're there. They're going to destroy Saddam. Right? God expresses his love for Abraham. Abraham intercedes on behalf of Saddam for some reason. Right? Saddam is destroyed anyway. Lot's wife. Right? Lot is a perplexing hero. From him come two nations from his daughters, from an incestuous relationship. Lot is saved. At first, Lot is a kind of strange hero, protecting the angels. And he's willing to send his daughters out
to get it,
in order to keep the angels from being, literally the word is sodomized. Lot's daughters and the birth of Moab and Ammon, the two nations that come from Lot, and the roots of Jewish monarchy. Rus comes from there.
That leads to David.
Right. Eventually. Exactly, to King David, right? And eventually to Mashiach from his line. Right? Avraham and Gerar, she's abducted by Abimelech, the king of Gerar, who is the king of the Palestinian nation at the time. The Plishtim, sorry, the Plishtim. Abimelech seeks a truce with Avraham over this mistake on his part. Yitzchak is born. Hagar and Ishmael are expelled. This is all in this parsha, right? Ishmael is not killed. He's saved miraculously by the well, right? There's an alliance made with Abimelech at Beersheba, at the seventh well, right? The 10th trial, they say, but we could debate whether it's really the 10th trial or the 9th trial, the famous, maybe the most famous chapter in all of the Torah, the Akkada, the binding of Isaac. It's the one that's most written about. And then finally the birth of Rivka at the end. Right? That's all that's in this parsha.
That's all. That's all.
So, what would you guess? I'll give you 3 guesses as to what Rav Hirsch writes about. We have 2 subjects we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay. What he would talk about?
Yeah.
See, now the obvious one is everyone's going to say probably the Akkada, but I bet you he didn't. Because I know his brain.
Trick question.
Trick question, yeah. He probably would not talk about the Akkada because everybody else does, and he probably has some other reason that it relates to something else. So I don't know. I'll take a wild guess. He's probably going to talk about Saddam because of the fact that it relates in his era.
So, in a sense, you're right on both of them.
Yeah.
But the pieces that he talks about in the Akkada and the pieces he talks about in Sodom and Gomorrah, right, are not what you would expect.
Okay.
At all. Okay. So let's. There's 2 little pieces he talks about, 2 words that are, and by the way, they're very connected in terms of how Rav Hirsch thinks, right? Rav Hirsch's view is Torah im derech eretz. The Torah and derech eretz, Torah and the world are not separated, right? That they have a place together in the world, right? That we don't have to hide from the world. And it's a theme that's part of Rav Hirsch's strength and power and originality. Right? Says in Beresh, in Genesis 22:9, Avraham returned to his young men. They rose up and they went together to Bathsheba. This is at the end of the Akkada, right?
They get the climax, which isn't really much of a climax. Hey, well, we went.
Exactly, right? It goes on to say, this is not an unusual story, the story of the Akkada in some ways, right? The story in all cultures have stories of the founder, the hero, going on a great journey, slaying dragons or doing literally Herculean tasks, right? Rising up to the gods, killing villains, right? Goes through, right? And finally, he's completed his task with one great spiritual leap, whether it's, rising to heaven on a horse or communing with the Father, whatever, the Buddha sitting in their tree. It's some like massive revelatory thing that changes the person, transfigures the person completely. Right? And this is what the story of Avraham and Yitzchak is here, right? And what does it say, right? It says that as the four people go to the Akkada, Avraham tells two lads to stop, right? We know through Medrash and tradition that those two are Eliezer, his servant, and Ishmael, the older brother. Right? He says, you wait here, the lad and I will continue. Meaning, Yitzchak and myself. Right? Yitzchak is the one that is chosen. It's a complex issue for Avraham. He clearly didn't hesitate. At the same time, Avraham, the master logician, the person who came to an understanding of God without revelation, for 60 years or 70 years, maybe even, without revelation, he was preaching the idea of monotheism at risk to his own life, right? Because he had logically came to this conclusion. Now, we talked about this before, he had a promise from God that Yitzchak was the one for whom the venture of monotheism, of Judaism, would continue, not Ishmael. Right? God said it's only through Yitzchak. And then God said, take Yitzchak and kill him. He's not married, he has no children. So Abraham could have at least scratched his head. Yeah. Wait a second. You said he's going to be the father of the people that follows after me, but we're going to kill him before he has any children. So this is a tremendous test for Abraham on many levels. It was a moral test for him. Come on in. Come join us. Okay. So, I'm just reading a little bit about Rav Hirsch on the Parsha.
Okay.
Hi. This is Charles. How are you?
How you doing, Rabbi?
And what I was saying, I'll just review a little bit for a moment, okay, is that this Parsha, as you're familiar with it, right, is absolutely packed with events after events after events. Saddam and Gomorrah, the Akkada, the binding of Isaac, recovery from his bris. It's just one thing after the relationship with Abimelech, right? Sarah being taken and then returned. It's the treaty with Fichol and Abimelech. There's so much, right? So I'll ask you the same question I asked Charles, right? What do you think Rav Hirsch writes about? What would you guess? Yeah, two subjects. Pick any two subjects.
I would think the binding of Isaac and Ishmael.
Oh, very good. I didn't even mention Ishmael, but also the Ishmael being sent away is in this Parsha too, right? Very good. Well, you're half right. But if I was doing the Parsha quiz on Shabbos, I would say you get probably about a quarter of a point.
Okay.
Because although he does write about the Akkada, it's not what you expect. I promise you that. The problem for Avraham was manifold. We dwell a great deal on how can a person sacrifice their child, right? On top of it, Avraham lived in a world where human sacrifice was quite common, and he had devoted most of his life to fighting against such a horror, right? And now he's going to do it, right? When it comes time later in the Parsha, and God says, I'm going to destroy this evil nation of Saddam, Avraham argues relentlessly with the Almighty. So what is this, 40, 35, 30, 20, 10, right? How can the judge of the universe not be righteous? That you would kill the righteous with the innocent, with the guilty. How could it be? And yet, God says, take your son, your only one, the one who you love, Yitzchak, and take him to the mountain, sacrifice him. And it says he got up in the morning, saddled his horse, and off he went. Literally.
Yeah.
No argument.
So what were his problems, right? His problems were, and by the way, on top of it, he had waited 100 years, for this boy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now the boy is not only born, he's strong, he's healthy, 38 years old, he's, ready, and he's going to kill him. So this boy who he loves so much, who he's poured so much into, right? He has to do this, right? So that's one problem. Right? Another problem is he's doing this in such a way that other people will know about it, right? At least 2 others will know about it, and it seems a lot of the world knew what was going on. It seems like he's a hypocrite. For 60 years, 70 years, he's been preaching, right? God loves people. People are his creation, right? There's no freedom to destroy people, right? People are not to be shechted like a cow, right? People are in my image. Cherish them, right? You think that you'll have a better crop by killing your son, giving him to the gods? Absolutely not. This was a huge part of Abraham's life. Right? Now, that's what he has to do. Right? So, not only is it the pain of a father, right? It's the hypocrisy of a preacher, right? Of a teacher.
Yeah.
But maybe the single most difficult thing for Abraham was that it didn't make any sense at all. Right? Why? Because, and we have to remember Abraham's personality, right? Abraham was probably the first truly great theological philosopher, right? And as we said in a conversation earlier, that unlike Melchizedek, unlike Shem, he didn't come to an appreciation of God through experience. He came through appreciation of God through analysis. So God comes to him and he recognizes that God comes to him and says, it's not Ishmael, it's Yitzchak. Yitzchak is the one who will carry on the venture, right? He'll carry on the venture, right? And the venture will be through the seed of Yitzchak. Right? So what's the problem here? Yitzchak has no children. He has no children, right? He's not married.
Yeah.
Yesterday you told me that it's going to be the children of Yitzchak. Today you're saying kill Yitzchak before he has any children. Is God a liar? Is he making false promises? Abraham's head must be exploding, right? Because he's come to understand the perfection of God,
Yes.
right? And suddenly he's had this communication with God that Yitzchak is the one who will be the father, the next in line. Right? But it will end with Yitzchak if it's to be that, because I'm going to kill him now. Right? So this is a very difficult process, but it's very clear that Abraham doesn't hesitate. And the description of Yitzchak and Abraham leaving behind Ishmael and Eliezer, the 2 lads behind, right, is a very poignant moment, right? And we know about the conversation that they had. There's the fire, there's the wood. Where's the ram? Right? God will provide. Right? But what Rav Hirsch wants to talk about is one word. Just one word, right? Yachdav. Yachdav, right? This word means together, right? There's another word for together, and it's a common word actually. Many Jewish organizations use the word commonly. Yachad means together, right? But Yachdav means intimately together, as a father and son walk, who love each other dearly. They could be holding hands, they could be hands on shoulders, whatever. But it's but you both have young children, right? You know this feeling, right? We all know it. Right? It's Yachdav. Right? So here is Avraham and Yitzhak leaving behind the two others, right, to go and do this thing. Right? And clearly Yitzhak is on side. His father is 138 years old, and he's 38 years old, and powerful. When his wife sees him, she falls off the camel because she sees this powerful man in the field, and he's like a malach. He's like burning. He's praying the mincha service in the field. Right? When Rivka sees him, it's like she's seen a vision. She falls off the camel. Right at that point, Yitzhak was not a weakling. Right? If he said no to his father physically could not overpower. Right? Yitzhak not only does it, he wants his father to tie him very tight. Right? Why? Because he doesn't want to be a flawed. He doesn't want to have a flaw. When you bring a sacrifice to God, right? You don't bring your worst cow, your worst sheep. You bring your best, the most perfect one. Right? So Yitzhak is thinking, if I'm going to be accepted by Hashem, right? I don't want to move suddenly, right, and ruin the shechting. So he wants his father to tie him tight, right, at that moment. Right? And the whole concept, it's a little bit hard for us to understand it, but the difference between why he fought so hard with God about Saddam was that God was punishing the people of Saddam. You heard this as well. He wasn't punishing Yitzhak. He was actually claiming Yitzhak as his own. Right? He was saying, Yitzhak is mine. And by the way, later on we understand Yitzhak has a special status that neither his father nor his son have. Right? Because he is viewed as the perfect korban. Because he
can't leave Israel.
It was there. He can't leave Israel. Exactly right. Since you are the perfect korban, right? You can't leave Israel. So Yitzhak has a very special status, and he's clearly impacted by the process. Right? There's no question about it. But he has no more resistance to it than Avraham does. I want to do this thing right, is what's on his mind. So as they walk up the hill, right, leaving behind the other two, it's Yachdav, intimate, right? Intimate and loving togetherness, right? So Rav Kook says this shouldn't be a surprise. They're about to accomplish, a tremendous leap of spiritual development, to give yourself to God completely, in every sense of the word. Now they don't do it, right?
No.
In fact, they don't do it, right? The angel says, Avraham, don't harm the child, right? And clearly, Avraham actually wants to go through with it, and Yitzhak wants to go through with it. And we know that when we pray the prayers on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we talk about the ashes of Yitzhak. Right? There are no ashes of Yitzhak. He walked down the mountain, right? What are we talking about? In a sense, there were. From God's point of view, Yitzhak gave up his life at that moment, right? And when we tell God, in the merit of the ashes of Yitzhak, we have something to talk about here. Because it was God's decision not to do it, not Yitzhak's, not Abraham's. Right? So they had accomplished everything that they needed to accomplish, right? They had climbed the mountain, they had risen to heaven, they had conquered the dragons, they had whipped the evil people. Whatever it was that in all cultures that the hero has to do, that Hercules has to do, they have done. Right? They can feel pretty good about themselves. You know? Now they walk down, here's the two guys who didn't qualify to go up the hill. Right? Right? So they walk with them, yachad. Right? No. With the four of them, it's yachdav. And this is Rav Hirsch's point. It's very important to understand. Were they transfigured? Were they different people? There's an argument that Yitzchak was really a different person, and I'll explain why later. But they did not feel that they had the right to have any sense of personal accomplishment that would separate them from the two that didn't come with them. Right? And so they walked, the four of them, yachdav, intimately together, with Ishmael, the son who was going to be banished, who was a danger to the venture, with Eliezer, the son of Cham, the grandson of Cham, right? The servant, right? They walk intimately together, yachdav. And so Hirsch's point is that he says that the story, as told in other cultures, will call for Avraham and Yitzchak to be transfigured, touched by their encounter with the divine. Having passed the supreme test and achieved full control of their inner selves, they would have had adequate reason to shun the world of the ordinary and ordinary folk. Any pride they would have felt would be well deserved. No one would hold it against them when you think what they'd gone through. But that's not the way of God. After their greatest triumph, Avraham and Yitzchak returned to ordinary people that they had previously left behind. They walk with them not superciliously, but in genuine togetherness. Every human being is worthy of respect without regard to station or rank. Lofty spiritual accomplishment in the view of the Torah presents no barrier to associating with those who do not share in this accomplishment. It does not produce spiritual masters perched atop the mountains. Real ones, or virtual ones, of their own making. To the contrary, the greater the person, the less superior, the less aloof he feels. Reaching for the sky and achieving celestial elevation does not have to be a recipe for haughtiness or separation. It is remarkable that Avraham and Yitzchak were able to walk up the mountain to face the test that they were going to face. But perhaps the Torah is telling us that it may be even more remarkable to their credit than when they walked down the mountain. They were able to walk down as well, yachdav, with intimate relations with people who had not participated. So that's one little piece of the Akkada, right? I've never discussed yachdav and yachad before. It's, this is Hirsch, right? This is Rav Hirsch, right? So the next one he deals with is circumcision, right? Because how does the Parsha begin? It begins with Avraham is recovering from his circumcision. Right? And circumcision, Rav Hirsch lived in Germany, right? Talk about living with the Parsha, right? Germany is outlawing and now not outlawing circumcision again, right? Right? They have all their own reasons for it, with no understanding of its significance, right? And its value, for that matter. It says, Hashem appeared to him, Avraham, in the plains of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of the tent in the heat of the day. Right? This was Avraham. It was the third day after the
very
bris.
hot day.
God had made it intensely hot so there would nobody be travelers. Because if the travelers, Avraham would feel compelled to care for them, right?
So he
made it so hot that nobody would leave their shade wherever they were. They would wait for nightfall or the next day to travel, because the third day is the most difficult day after an operation, right? The most painful day. But Avraham, in spite of that, was sitting in the heat of the day, not in the shade, right? Looking to do Haknasas Orchim, looking to care for guests. Right? Circumcision is one of the issues that anti-Semites have always held against Jews. Right? they use it as a form of hatred. So the anti-Semites point to the bris milah as a reason to reject us because they say it teaches us to reject them. Right? Bris milah is considered an ois. It is a sign of the covenant between Jews and God. But as we just learned in the previous piece, right, the fact that you connect to God does not mean you disconnect from man. It's actually quite the opposite. You're given a gift to share with man. Right? The purpose of the function of the bris, they insist, is to place a firewall between our community and the rest of the world. Because of the bris, Jews hold themselves to be a nation apart, living separate and aloof from the concerns of the rest of humanity. By the way, who describes us as a nation apart?
It's Hitler, probably.
No, but you're not that far off. It's in the Torah.
As a pharaoh.
Bilam.
Oh yeah, Bilam. Yeah, Bilam. Yeah, that's right.
Calls them a nation.
But he's referring to the Israelites, the Hebrews. Yeah. Okay.
By the way, interestingly, now that you mentioned it, right, it was a time when they weren't doing bris milah.
Yeah.
Right? In the desert, they didn't do bris milah. With the exception of the Levim, they didn't do bris milah because of the danger.
Yeah.
You don't do it if it's a danger to the child, and because they were traveling under difficult conditions, they didn't do it.
Well, that caused the whole big thing with Moshe's son. And the wife.
That was also
his wife.
That's right.
Yeah, remember with the rock, the whole shtick with that.
We'll come to that. But you're absolutely right. Our Parsha makes a very different statement about bris milah. Right? How does it play out? Right? Hashem's appearance to Avraham does not mark the first time that God spoke to him directly. Lech lecha, right? That's what he spoke to, right? Nonetheless, it is a first for him. Now Avraham assumes the role of a public navi, of a prophet. Right? Up until now, he's been a philosopher. Right? I can prove the existence of God through this and this and this, that there's only one God, and that's what he's been doing. Right? Now he's a navi, which means he actually has revelation that God wants him to pass on to the world. Right? And we're going to come to understand that in a second. Right? For Hashem, God will do nothing unless he reveals his secret to his servants, the Nevi'im. Right? God tells the prophets what's coming. He doesn't do it out of the blue. Therefore, right after the departure of his guests, after Abraham's guests leave, right, God tells him what's coming up. Right? I'm going to destroy Saddam. Right? It's significant that the Torah offers us a picture of Avraham at work in his new role only after he passes the test of performing the mitzvah of bris milah. Right? He hasn't been a public navi until this point. Right? The Torah suggests that while the universe is full of God's presence, only certain people get to experience the presence directly, the Nevi'im, the prophets, and only after an act of extraordinary devotion, such as the one that Avraham performed, bris milah, on himself. Right? What message does Avraham receive? We have to wait for it until the three visitors finish their meal and leave. This whole thing is tremendously ironic, right? They're angels. Right? What meal?
And why are they eating?
What are they eating? Right? They're doing Avraham a favor by seeming to eat.
Yeah.
Angels don't eat. They have no appetite. Right? On Yom Kippur, we don't eat. Right? Why? Because we're like malachim. We're like angels.
That's why we wear the white and all that.
We don't have appetites. We stand because angels, it says, don't have knees. Right? They have just straight legs. Right? It's a whole. It has to do with prophecy of Ezekiel and Shai, that they're straight legged, right? So we stand during Yom Kippur, right? We don't eat. We don't have relations. Our appetites are diminished, right? Because we're focusing only on the revelation of God at that time. What do we like? We're like malachim, right? In fact, there's a complaint that this is the one day that Sutton is really handicapped, that he can't do his job successfully of prosecuting the Jewish people, because they're doing everything right. Even if it's 24 hours. For 24 hours, they got it right. I have nothing to prosecute. Right? Because he doesn't prosecute angels, only people who are flawed. So it says, we have to wait till they finish eating their meal. It's a peculiar phrase. Anyway, Only then do we learn the crucial information that Hashem urges on Avraham, the planned destruction of Saddam, right? Of a whole major city, tremendously wealthy city. You know, Saddam,
this growing place.
That's right. Saddam was on the plains, right, by the Jordan, and it was a very lush community. In fact, unlike the rest of Israel, which is dependent on the rain, right, Saddam is described as being like Mitzrayim. Right? It's very interesting. That's how it's described, because it's dependent on the irrigation of a river, the Nile and Mitzrayim, and that's where the Lord chose to go, right, to a place where, and the nature of the flooding of a river, as opposed to rain, is that when you visit Israel, one of the things that strikes you is that Israel has constant mini climates. You drive for 15 minutes and you're like in a different place. You know, it's desert, it's lush, it's valley, it's mountains. You know, if you drive across America, you experience similar things, but it takes you 2 weeks. You know, in Israel, you go through all of these things like in rapid fire. Right? You know, there are mountains that are on one side are lush and the other side are desert. Right? How does it happen? Right? It also can happen to that. One farm will have rain and be lush, a farm that kept a Shemitah, and the farm next door will have a hailstorm and have its crop destroyed. That didn't keep the Shemitah. Right? So the seventh year. Right? Because it's the nature of a place dependent on rain, right? Is that it can rain in one place and not the other, right? When a river overflows, it affects everybody the same. The tzaddikim and the Rashaim, it affects the same, right? So Mitzrayim and also Saddam, right, didn't differentiate. There was no rewards or punishment for the good and the bad, because everybody, if the river didn't overflow, everybody starved. If it did overflow, everybody was wealthy. Right? So it didn't have to do with your own merit, whereas in the rest of Israel, it had to do with your merit. You know, how successful you were in agriculture, right? So Avraham doesn't find out about the plan of the angels, why the angels were there, right? Until he's finished feeding them and they've gone on their way, right? You know, okay, they tell him about Sarah, but not about this other mission that they have, right? You know, so, and for some reason, as soon as the angels are gone, God returns to the story of his plan for the destruction of Saddam, right? And tells Avraham, reveals it to him, and you can ask yourself, why? You know, if you tell Avraham, bring your son to Mount Moriah, to where I will tell you, right? Because I want him as a korban, I want him to be for me, right? It makes sense to tell it to Avraham. But the destruction of Saddam, right? Is it a lesson, Avraham, don't live like the people of Saddam? It's not a lesson Avraham needs. He doesn't live like them. He doesn't like the way they live. He's upset that his nephew lives there, right? There's no question that he condemns that behavior. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Right? So it's not a learning lesson for Avraham, right? The point that's being made here is that I love you so much, Avraham, I will tell you what the divine plan is. I will share it with you, even though it doesn't impact you directly. Now, it gives Avraham a moment to show what kind of person he is, what he's made from, right? That even though he's not a fan of the town, you know, still, you know, if there's somebody worth saving there, unlike Noah,
he didn't do anything,
right? He's going to make the argument. He's going to make the argument. So
just made a boat.
So Hirsch says you should picture two things, right? On one side you have the city of Saddam, right? It's a city of tremendous wealth, tremendous wealth, right? It says, on one hand, there's a picture of the dissolute city that banned acts of kindness to strangers, right? You know, if a stranger happened into Saddam, they put him on an iron bed, right? If he was too tall, they cut his legs off until he fit the bed,
Wow.
If he was too short, they stretched him until he fit the bed.
Wow.
It was their version of Haknosas Orchim, of welcoming guests.
Wow.
They wanted to make clear that nobody should bother them.
Yeah.
What we have, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, when you read Pirkei Avos, it talks about the Midah of Saddam. You would think that it describes the Midah of Saddam, the Midah of a chassid, of particularly someone who goes above the law, someone who says what's mine is for you and what's for you is for you. This is a particularly kind person. Right? The idea of what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine, this is the midah of a fool. Right? Or as a great rabbi once pointed out to me, the nature of many governments today. That redistribute the wealth.
Definitely.
Right. But the midah of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, which seems quite reasonable, is described as two things in Pirkei Avos. The midah of the Beinoni, the person who's not a Russian, but then it says it's also the midah, the character trait of Saddam. Saddam is like the Frank Sinatra song, right? If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, right? Saddam was a place that said, if you can make it, right, without any government support, without any charitable support, right, you're welcome here, right? You're one of us, right? You're a tough guy, right? A tough entrepreneur. Right? But if you need help, if the wheel has turned and you're there, right, you're not going to get any help here.
Didn't have much of a social assistance plan there.
No. And took pride in the fact that they didn't.
Wow.
Not that they didn't have it, but they took pride in it. There are many places they don't have it because they don't have.
Yeah.
Right? Jews have always, even if they don't have, put a little bit of something in the pushka for somebody who has even less. But it's understandable when a nation, we see nations that are starving to death, right? The fact that they can't help each other, we can understand it. But this is a place that took pride in, call it its personal independence, but also its lack of charity, right? So on one hand, you have the dissolute city that banned acts of kindness to strangers. On the other is a snapshot of the aged Avraham, right? He's already, not a young man. He's over 100, right? Racked with the pain of circumcision days earlier, in the most painful day, right? Nonetheless, scurrying about in the service of fellow human beings. The Torah puts these two images in stark relief against each other. By interrupting the narrative of God's foretelling the destruction of Saddam, after beginning that story, the Torah abruptly puts it on hold and switches to the coverage of Abraham's chesed. Right? The angels arrive, right? What are you doing here? Why is it that angels, they have to travel in groups? They're nervous to travel alone. The destruction of Saddam, after the beginning of the story, puts it on hold, switches the coverage of Abraham's chesed. All of this is linked and happens as a consequence of bris milah. Bris milah, right? Did the bris milah turn Avraham into an insular, jingoistic loner prepared to abandon the world and go it alone? Quite the opposite. Avraham is described as Avraham ha'ivri, right? He that is from the other side, right? Some say it means he came from the other side of the river, right? But clearly he was one who stood against everybody else's point of view, right?
Yeah, his other side of the argument.
Is right. He stood for one God. Everybody else stood for, polytheism. Ha'ivri,
idols.
the one who would stand on one side of the issue against the catcalls of the entire world. Yet the immediate aftermath of the bris depicts Avraham as a friend to all humanity. Where do we find him immediately after the bris? Still living in the very non-Jewish, with the very non-Jewish Anna, Eshkol, and Mamre, his three friends, right, who are not Jewish, right? The circumcision did not cause Avraham to change his relationship with the three people with whom he had previously forged an alliance. This is the same theme that we had in when he came down the mountain, right? I'm a different person. I have a bris. I have the sign of God on me, right? You're still my friends. We still have a relationship, right? I'm not separating. I'm not leaving you, right? Right? Torah im derech eretz. When commanded regarding the bris, Avraham had harbored only one concern, according to Chazal. Chazal are sages. Perhaps people would now draw away from him because he's different. This fear drove him out of his recuperation into the blazing sun to pursue the opportunities of Hachnos Orchim. He insisted to God, right, that I will not, just because of the bris, separate myself. I'm rolling up the four sides of my tent. I'm going to find people to take care of. I live for this, right? And what kind of Orchim did he welcome into his home? And with lavish and meticulous attention to detail, uncircumcised wanderers with dirt on their feet. After convincing them to join him, please, if it's pleasing to you, stay with me, right?
That's how he sees
He involves his entire household in serving them, freshly preparing all food items. Sarah's baking bread, Ishmael's taking care of the meat, right? These three guests had a special place in his heart. They removed the fear from his heart that bris milah would create unwanted distance between himself and the rest of the world. The upshot of Avraham's bris milah is that he continues to flourish as a paragon of humane concern for people. And of course, this is something that's spiritually in our DNA. Because you see that Jews, way beyond their numbers or even their resources, are charitable not just to Jewish organizations, to all kinds of organizations. And Israel itself goes way out on a limb, When Iran had an earthquake, they were prepared to send people to save lives in Iran, right? In Turkey, in Haiti, right? And whenever there's a natural disaster, the first people on site, Israel, it's a tiny country. They're flying all over the place saving people who are not Jews, right? It comes from this. This is where it comes from. It comes from Abraham, and specifically at the time of his bris, he says, this is not what's intended to separate me from the world. To distinguish me to God as a godly person, yes. He's recognized as a prince when it's time to bury Sarah, as a prince of God, by the people. For sure. But not that he should feel an aloofness, a separation, that I'm going to go to a mountaintop and commune. No. God gives me this to share. Right? So, and this is actually, part of the Torah of Rav Hirsch. So I just want to raise that before we continue with Horeb. So it's kind of two things that I think, I certainly know if I hadn't gone through this today, that I'm not sure that these would have been the focus of this Parsha, because the Akkada stares you in the eye so much, and everything else is there, right? And it's something that we mentioned, that I'll just mention one more time here, is that just a side note of the Akkada, which is worth understanding, is that part of the purpose of the Akkada was to do exactly the opposite of what it appears to be. That men felt that if they wanted their crops to flourish, they would take their firstborn and slaughter them to a god. Right? This presupposes a certain understanding. An understanding that your children, and by the way your wives too, right, have the status of cattle. Right? You can do with them what you want. Nobody is going to bring you to court because you killed your child. You sacrificed your child. In fact, people will say that's a good thing. Right? Nobody is going to bring you to court because you raped your wife. She's there to serve, right? Whether she wants to or not. Right? That was the world in which Avraham lived. In the Akkada, God makes very clear to Avraham, right? That which you find to be precious is not yours. It's mine. Right? And I don't want this killed in the end. But I want you to know that a child does not belong to his mother and father. A mother and father cannot do with a child what they want. Right? The child is in my image as much as anything else. Right? You know, if you look at your passport, right, you'll notice that you don't own your passport.
The Canadian government does.
Canadian government does. You think it's your passport. It's not your passport. It's the Canadian government's passport, and when they want it back, they can take it from you. They can take your passport, and you'll say, but it's my passport. No, look inside, you'll see. It's my passport, not yours.
Wow.
God is telling this about our children. Like everything else in this world, I make you the steward of what is mine, to care for it, to raise this child, right? You don't have the right of life and death over this child, of cruelty and kindness, right? You have responsibility, right? Because this child is mine. Right? And that's a very big point of the Akkada, is to let Avraham understand that clearly, and through Avraham, all of mankind. Avraham is the father of many nations.